Hey there, this is Jamie Russo. I help people start and run profitable co-working spaces. I host a weekly podcast called Everything Co-working, and I'm here to dive into a little bit of a preview of this week's podcast. So I'm doing a series based on a keynote that I delivered for the Office R&D Flex Office conference a few weeks ago. We're talking about the changing rules of engagement for Flex Office and co-working. And last week we did kind of an overview, and this week we are diving into the rules of engagement, what you sell. So we're talking about how what we sell, we need to question and rethink, and those that are successful coming out of the pandemic have evolved to meet our changing end user. So, three things that we talk about on the podcast with some bonuses, but the three primary buckets are flexibility, privacy, and experimenting with an HQ model. So, the thing I would highlight about flexibility is that we consider ourselves to be in the flex office industry. We're already really flexible, right? So, the thing that has shifted is that we are becoming even more flexible, which makes this operationally more complex. So, Upsuite just released their Q3 data, and they're showing that major markets are recovering at different rates. There are some sub-markets that are close to being at capacity, and they mentioned Midtown Atlanta and North Austin. So I think there are some markets with geographic or end user drivers that are filling up space more quickly. And then I think at the individual operator level, what we're seeing is that some operators are being a little bit scrappy and responsive to the end user, which is serving them well. So one of the aspects of flexibility is co-working spaces tend to operate on a menu, a pretty small menu of options. And I'm a pretty big advocate of making sure we don't overwhelm the end user with choices on our website. And yet we see some operators being more successful than ever by moving away from that menu approach and moving into the personalization approach. So instead of saying, we sell private offices, hot desks, and dedicated desks, we're saying, and Fueled Collective is a brand that's doing a great job of acting out this personalization approach. Come in for a tour, tell us what you're looking for, and we're going to help find a membership that fits your needs. So that may not be necessary for the freelancer or the very small, independent entrepreneur, but for the teams that are starting to think about shifting into space, they have to figure out, what works for them. They don't want to buy more than what they're actually going to use. So they need some customization, which means more plans in our operating, our space management system, more complexity to manage. But that personalization, I think, is helping folks fill up space. The other thing we're seeing with flexibility is more of a mix and match approach. So again, instead of saying you pick one thing, you either get a private office or you get a hot desk or you get a dedicated desk, saying you can mix and match. You can choose co-working plus space. You can come in and you get access and you can book as needed, also making technology even more important than ever. And I use the gym analogy a lot when I talk about co-working memberships, but when you go to the gym, you are not paying only to use the treadmill or only to use the bench press, right? You're paying for access to what you need on a given day. And so I think we're seeing more of that come through. And many of us certainly know we're seeing more demand for privacy. But a couple of unique things that I think are happening. So one, access to office. And again, this could be on an on-demand shared basis. So I don't need, my office 5 days a week. So I just need a bucket of hours that I can reserve when I need it. And I'm happy to share that office with others. A fairly new thing. It's different from the day office model. It's a recurring package and a way to oversell private space that you have. Another aspect we're seeing some folks have success with is rooms of dedicated desks. So instead of leaving dedicated desks out in the open, but with more privacy, actually giving those folks a small office and not a giant room of 20 dedicated desks, but a team suite that has 5 to 8 dedicated desks that are occupied by individual users who aren't affiliated with each other, but like access to that private office feel and not being out in the open space. Another aspect is phone booths. So these have always been important, but in today's Zoom culture, if you don't have places where folks can jump on a Zoom call, you will not sell your open seat membership. So making that investment, or if you're starting a co-working space, you really cannot overdo phone rooms or phone booths that we can, it's if you're starting from scratch, you can build them from scratch. And if you need to add some to an existing space, brands like Room, lots of Zen booth, lots of options out there to get them on demand. But those, because of supply chain issues, are getting harder to access on a short time frame. So make sure you order those well in advance. The other big theme that we're talking about is the HQ model. So getting creative about how to serve bigger teams. If you're an operator that has a pre-existing space and you didn't plan for bigger teams like enterprise users or even small businesses giving up their leases, or if you're a landlord and you're trying to figure out how to serve that new end user, experimenting with an HQ model where you're providing one point of service for an end user that is taking a large room. So we're talking bigger requirements, like 20 to 40 people. You can build out a somewhat customized space for them and then still give them access to a co-working space elsewhere in the building. And I talk about management agreements a lot. This is a great opportunity for a creative partnership with your landlord if you already have a presence in the building and you're looking for ways to expand and serve a new end user base. So just a few highlights for what's on the podcast this week, and that will go live tomorrow, which is the 17th.